Hello and welcome to this new episode of Matrix Tutorials, the number 3, in which we're going to create a bot using the matrix-bot-sdk, a TypeScript SDK maintained by the matrix.org Foundation to create bots for Matrix. We're going to create a simple bot that expands jargon, one thing we don't really lack of in the open source project. The bot is going to take a dictionary with abbreviations and definitions, and it's going to monitor rooms, and when somebody in the room where the bot is uses an abbreviation, the bot is going to expand that to explain what it is. To give you a more concrete example, I created a conversation in a room with the jargon bot where I say, is KGX on AGO, which does not make sense for anybody except people who are familiar with GNOME from the technical perspective. So the bot is going to explain to me that AGO stands for Apps for GNOME and KGX stands for GNOME Console. And I can ask many things. For example, is it a XDG standard? And it's going to tell me that XDG is free desktop. Cool. So how do we create a bot like this one? It's actually fairly simple. We are going to look at matrix-bot-sdk. And the first result we find on Google, which is third to live matrix-bot-sdk, is the good one. This is the repository of the SDK itself. We are not going to use directly the repository, but we are going to scroll down to the documentation section and click on documentation for the project is available here. So let's click to that, and we are on the documentation. The left column is pretty dense. You have everything the bot supports, and it can be a little overwhelming, and we don't actually need that as a newcomer. We need two things. The first is at the bottom, and it's npm install matrix-bot-sdk. It's just telling us how to install the dependency in our project, and then we are going to follow the documentation. So first, I'm going to move to Visual Studio instance. I have created a jargon folder in which I'm going to simply type npm install matrix-bot-sdk. So npm is going to do the install of the matrix-bot-sdk, and I'm going to use that opportunity of fiddling with npm to also install TypeScript. For some reason, npm seems to be quite slow. Okay, npm install TypeScript, because this is a TypeScript project. Cool. Then I'm going to create a new file, which I'm going to call index.ts because it's a TypeScript project. This is an empty file, and that's what I need for now. I'm going to go back to the documentation and click on the bot documentation in the templates and guides section. Bot documentation. So there is app service usage and bot usage. App service is for bridges, but we are probably going to cover that in another episode. For now, we are going to focus on the bot usage. So this page is quite dense and you have many examples. The first section, creating the bot account, is about how to create the bot account on an instance and how to retrieve the access token. For the sake of simplicity, I'm going to assume that you have an account for the bot and that you already have retrieved the access token. We are going to move to the Quick Start Bot section and do something that many people do in open source, is we are going to take inspiration. Moving on to Visual Studio instance, I can paste my fantastic code that I have created myself. So it's quite dense. I'm going to trim a few comments for the sake of simplicity and comment what is actually happening here. So we have first three constants. The first one is the home server URL, as the name probably told you. Just a note here, I don't think the matrix-bot-sdk supports the well-known files, or at least not just like that. So for example, my home server is ergaster.org, but it's hosted on matrix.ergaster.org. So this is what I'm going to use for for the home server URL. The access token, I'm going to retrieve it from a separate method. You should be able to retrieve yours. We can cover that in another video if you are not too sure how to do it. And then we have storage. So storage is fairly simple. It's just the memory of the bot. I'm going to call it store.json. It's a simple JSON file that the bot is going to use to store all the rooms it's supposed to be in and its state, basically. Then we have a line which is instantiating the client, so creating the client itself using the home server access token, and storage we have created just above. The line below, auto join rooms mixin, defines the fairly expected behavior of many bots. Many bots are public and you can just invite them in the rooms and they are going to accept the invites. In some specific cases, this is something you don't want, but in our case, this is something we do want. So we are going to leave it as is. Then we register a common handler on room messages. So this basically means we say to the bot, when there is a new room message, you need to call that method and it's going to tell you what to do. The handler is below. We are going to follow with that. Just note that it's a room.message. We can have other kind of events. If you go back to the documentations, you can go to the watching for events section and you can see there are various kind of events, such as, for example, the room join and leave. You can do something when people are joining or leaving the room. Okay, back to Visual Studio. We have the handler and then we are just starting the client. Well, the bot actually. And below is the actual handler. This is where the core logic of the bot lives. So what is the default handler doing? The default handler doing starts with two lines. The first is checking that we have a text message and that it's not an image, for example, because we only want to answer to text messages. And the next one is the sender. So we are checking that we are not answering to ourselves. This makes sense because we can be stuck in loops. For example, in the bot we have seen that I have made a demo at the beginning. If we say, for example, if somebody in the room says AGO, the bot says, oh, somebody said AGO, it means appsfognum.org. Oh, somebody said AGO, that means appsfognum.org. Oh, somebody said AGO, etc. So this can generate a lot of noise and we can end up kicked or banned from the rooms. It's a nice safety measure. Then we're going to check to enter. So we get the body of the message. This is what people actually typed. And then we are going to perform a little check on that. That check is just that the message starts with exclamation mark hello. If it doesn't start with that, we return, which means we exit the handler and don't do anything anymore. That does not exit the bot, of course, it just exits the handler. So the bot is still going to monitor for new messages, and when there are new messages, it's going to call the handler again. If the message starts with exclamation mark hello, we are just going to send a reply, which is hello world. So let's do that. We are going to compile that file, which is a TypeScript file, into JavaScript. So to do that, we are going to do npx tsc -- watch everything that is TypeScript. So it's going to watch every modification we make to the TypeScript file, compile that, and create a JS file. In the terminal I have next to that, I can see I have a index.ts file, which is the one I'm editing, and I have the index.js file, which is the one I'm actually going to run. I'm going to make sure I have stopped my former instance of the bot before making a new test, and then I can start my instance. So for that, I'm just going to run node index.js. The bot is going to start, and I can get back to Firefox. And if I say, for example, is KGX on AGO, like I did before, it should not answer. That's perfect. And if I say, is it a XDG standard? it doesn't answer either. If I say hello, it does not answer. And if I say hello, it does answer. So that's cool. The bot works as we understood it did. Now, how to make the bot behave like we want? Actually, we are going to take, we are just going to reuse the example and make a slight modification in the handle command. As I said earlier, the handler is where all the core logic happens. I'm just going to do one thing first. I'm going to create a dictionary, which I can create, for example, here. So I'm going to create a const dict equal a JSON object with all the abbreviations and definitions. I'm going to collapse that for the sake of visibility. And then we are going to tackle the handle command. So we are going to keep the two safeguards at the beginning of the handler because we still want to answer to text messages and we don't want to answer to ourselves, which are good safety measures. But what we are going to do is to modify this test and this answer. We are still interested in getting the body of the message because we want to know what people sent to know if we match on the definitions and to create an answer. So first, I'm going to remove that test. And what we are going to do is we are going to iterate on all the keys in the dictionary. So what we want to do is to iterate on the dictionary. We want to see for each key if the message contains it. We are going to use regex for that. It might sound a little overkill at first sight, but you are going to understand why it's useful actually. Regex. So the naive version would be to just say the regex is just, well, the key itself. To see why this is not a good idea, we are going to expand the dictionary again and go to that entry. We have an entry which is RT for release team. And if somebody in the room said, this is a piece of art, art contains RT. With this regex right here, if somebody said, this is a piece of art, it would match. And the bot would say, actually, that means release team, which is not the case and is annoying. So we are just going to add two tokens before and after the key, which are \b, well, double backslash because this is JavaScript. And this is just going to match on full keyword. So then we are going to test if we don't find that, so let's use a little of pseudocode here. If we don't match the entry, what do we actually want to do? We don't want to exit the handler entirely because we have iterated on the first entry, for example, right now. So what we want to do is not exit the handler entirely, is move to the next key to see if there is another definition we could match on. To do that, we are going to use the continue keyword, which is escaping the for loop, well, not escaping the for loop, but escaping that iteration of the for loop. Now, how do we say we don't match that entry? We say that by doing a match on the body with the regex. So if we did match something, what we want to do is we want to build an answer. We don't want to just send an answer, because if we match on several terms, we would say one answer per term, which is a little bit annoying and generates noise. So instead, what we are going to do is we are going to create a blank response. Typing is hard. Response, empty. We are going to create a blank response, and we are going to add key, colon space, and the definition for that key in the response. This is almost correct, but now we also want to add line breaks between definitions if we have several definitions in a single response. And to do that properly, we are going to do response plus equal \n. And we are just going to check that we are not doing that if this is the first entry we add to the response. So we're going to add if response.length is superior to 0. Alright, correct. Now we want to do the reply, and the reply we want to do is not hello world. We want to reply with the actual response. Typing is hard. It's almost that. We just need to do a final check, because if we don't match on anything here, we still have an empty response, and the bot can send that. We don't want to send an empty response to every message where we don't match anything. So what we are going to do is we are going to do a little check, which is if response.length is 0. So if we have nothing to say, well, return and don't say anything. Let's check if it happens in practice. So the TypeScript file was generated, compiled without an error, which is a good news. We are going to do node injects.js, and the bot is starting, which is good news too. Let's have a look at it right now and see if I say, for example, hello, it's not supposed to answer. And if I say xdd, okay, agu, xdg evo, it's going to give me all the answers I need. So that's it for the bot. It's a fairly simple one. We could do something a little different. We can still optimize things or move things around to make the bot better. For example, those 3 arguments could be moved in a configuration JSON file, or the dictionary itself could be in a self-contained file that is imported and not in the index file. But those are more JavaScript or TypeScript considerations that I'm not going to cover here for the sake of brevity. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and I'll see you next week for either an interview or tutorial. I'm not sure yet. I see you around.